Junior Motorsports may be making some more Cup Series starts in 2025. The future of Chicago Street Course is uncertain currently at the moment, and we have some pretty big updates in the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint schemes we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace and Corey Hines 2025 Robin Hood schemes that we'll see in 4 Cup Series races in 2025, including this weekend at Kansas Speedway. I think both of them look really, really good. I love the yellow on them. I love the black number they've got on them. I think the colors look really, really solid. Looking forward to seeing them on the racetrack throughout 2025. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tony Breidinger's 2025 Pedal Commander scheme that we'll see in tomorrow's Truck Series race at Kansas Speedway. Honestly, truck looks okay. It's pretty interesting that Pedal Commander is coming in to sponsor for the weekend. It's decent. We'll see if she can actually have a good run at Kansas Speedway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2025 Bill Submarine Patriotic scheme that we'll see during the Coca-Cola 600. I really like this car. I like the different look compared to the other Bill Submarine scheme that we've seen this year. I like the colors on the car overall. It does look pretty good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at the Coca-Cola 600. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Mosek's 2025 MKS scheme that we'll see tomorrow afternoon during the Truck Series race at Kansas. I think the scheme actually looks okay. I think the colors on this truck look really, really solid. They do look pretty good in my opinion. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Kansas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osavar's 2025 Gamebridge Indy 25 scheme that we'll see during the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. I really like this car. One of my favorite Gamebridge schemes we've seen so far this year. The colors look fantastic. They look really, really good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at the All-Star race. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2025 Logitech scheme that we'll see during the All-Star race next weekend. Finally, first Logitech sponsorship for Bubba. I gotta say this car actually looks really good. I do love the simplicity of this car, but I do think it looks really, really solid. The colors work pretty well on this one. I think it looks pretty good. Definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack next week in North Wilkesboro. I think it looks awesome and looks really, really great, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Kansas purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $11,055,250, and for the truck race, it's $782,900. Cup Series, obviously, they increased the charter money for 2025 going to the next deal, which teams, of course, are receiving a little bit more of that money. But the Truck Series, because they've only got 31 trucks this weekend, that number is down. This is one of the reasons why the Truck Series has been struggling to have the number of trucks show up, because the purse money just isn't there for them currently at the moment. And I feel like the Truck Series does need a little more money coming in if the series is going to survive long term. Nonetheless, I think that Cup has some good purse money for this weekend. The Truck Series definitely has a lot of work to do to get that up, but I do think at least for Cup, it is good for that. So at least the Cup Series has more increased purse money for the weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Busch. As reported by Adam Stern last night, that Busch in his Q1 earnings highlighted Busch Beer as a top performer in its U.S. group and the number one seller in their group for 2025. Meanwhile, Busch Light, which is their second biggest brand, did have a little bit of drop compared to even Busch Beer. Busch Beer, of course, sponsors Ross Chastain in the NASCAR Cup Series. They currently have a multi-year deal as a sponsorship with Trackhouse Racing. So seeing a company like Busch still continue to grow, I think they increase the number of sales they've had in recent years. I think that is a big deal. And I think for Busch, I think that is a major, major win for them and for a big consumer brand. When you think about consumer brands, Busch is one of those big consumer brands that does a lot of advertising as well. So I think this actually is a really big deal for Busch, all things considered, and pretty exciting awesome to see that their Q1 earnings were up and they were at the top. I think that's a big win, and I think it's good for Busch to see that number be up a little bit, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. As yesterday on social media, Junior Motorsports officially confirmed and posted that they have now led 15,000 laps in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which I believe is maybe the most or second most of all Xfinity Series teams in the history. That is a really big deal. You think about success of junior motorsports, right? We talk about success of lap sled. I think lap sled is such a very important factor when it comes to success. And I think junior motorsports has been such a successful team for the last 20-something years because they've been around for about 20 years at this point. So I think seeing them now have 15,000 lap sled all time is a major accomplishment because you think about all the drivers that have been able to lead laps for that team. Dale Jr., Justin Allgaier, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick. Probably going to be seeing Shane Van Gisbergen lead. Connor Zilisch, Ross Chastain led some laps. There's a lot of great names that have led laps. Mark Martin, too, who's won for Junior Motorsports. I think that there's been a lot of success for the Junior Motorsports team and program, and I think it's pretty awesome to see that 15,000 laps have been accomplished for Junior Motorsports in Xfinity competition. Congratulations to them. I think in the next couple years they're going to get the 20,000 lap sled ever. I think that's a massive deal for them to reach 15,000 lap sled in Xfinity Series competition. Really awesome stuff for them. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 1.5 mile tracks. As a report by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, and he reported some very interesting information in regards to lap sled on mile and a half in the next gen era. So currently the driver who's led the most laps in the next gen era mile and a half is obviously Kyle Larson, but the numbers shocked me. Kyle Larson has led 1,395 laps, so he could reach 1,400 lap sled on mile and a half this weekend. The second place guy is Christopher Bell. He's only led 614 compared to Kyle Larson. Then you have William Byron, who's at 548. Chase Elliott has led 321. Behind him, Bubba Wallace with 303. Bubba almost has led more laps than Chase Elliott on mile and a half. That's actually kind of an insane stat when you really think about it. And for Kyle Larson, too, we know Larson's been the best in the next gen era, and we know he's one of the favorites going into this weekend at Kansas Speedway, considering he won the most recent spring race at the track in the closest finish in NASCAR Cup Series history. I think Larson will get there. He's actually closing in on a pretty important stat as well that not a lot of people have been talking about. He could reach 10,000 laps led all time in Cup competition this weekend if he leads 148 out of 267 laps, or if we go to overtime and he's still leading, he can increase that number. But I think it's pretty awesome to see Larson continue building up those stats. I think it's pretty wild to see that Larson has double of what other people have. I think that's pretty wild, but I also think it's a really big deal for the series for that to happen, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Channel 5. As it was reported by Bob Parker yesterday that Channel 5 will televise the NASCAR Mexico race on the Channel 5 channel, which of course is part of the televised Mexico channels and will be broadcasted in Spanish as well. Channel 5, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the biggest channels in Mexico. So this is a really, really big deal because we don't know how big this NASCAR Mexico race is going to be. They've sent drivers down like Daniel Suarez, Chase Elliott, I believe Christopher Bell, and Ryan Blaney down to promote the event, and there's a lot of excitement around that event as well. Now, it's unknown of how long they're going to be down there. We know right now they're going to be there for this year. There's a lot of rumors they were going to cancel, but I don't think they're canceling, especially only being a month away at this point. They're probably not canceling it, but I got to say, this is still a really big win in my opinion, because I think that broadcasting it can bring a lot of people in. You know that Daniel Suarez is going to be popular down there. We know it's going to be a big success in my opinion, and I think that there is a lot of potential with something like this event. So I'm definitely excited about this for sure. I think it's a big deal that Channel 5 is going to broadcast this race, especially in Mexico. I think it's going to give the opportunity for a lot of younger Mexican fans to get interested in something like this, and I think it could bring a lot of eyes onto the table. I think this is really exciting and really great stuff. And I think it's cool that Channel 5 will be able to broadcast the NASCAR Mexico race on their channel. Well, I'm very intrigued to see if there's going to be other drivers in Mexico running during the weekend, like the Xfinity Series race, for example. We'll just have to wait and see there. But I think it's a big deal to see that Channel 5 will get the opportunity to televise the NASCAR Mexico race. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Alexander. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Jason Alexander will be driving a 02 truck for Young's Motorsports for 3 Truck Series races in 2025, including next weekend at North Wilkesboro during All-Star Race Weekend. The other 2 races were not confirmed and announced on that day. Now, Jason Alexander, of course, currently serves in the Army National Guard currently at the moment, but has made a couple select starts in ARCA and has also made a couple starts in Arcades as well, where he does have a couple top 10s. Now, he did make his Craftsman Truck Series debut last year at the Milwaukee Mouthful for Iridium Motorsports, and he did finish in 36th position, unfortunately. Now, Jason Alexander is a very young driver who doesn't have a ton of experience, but this could be a very interesting opportunity. I think Young's Motorsports, you look at their Xfinity program, they've been pretty strong, but I don't think their truck program has put as much effort into it, except I do think they've had some decent performances over the last couple weeks, where I believe Stephen Parsons almost got a top 10 at Texas. So I'm very intrigued to see how Jason is going to do it. I have to think he's going to run Charlotte as well in a couple weeks as well, because he's gone and raced there before. So I would have to think he'll probably be there too. But I'm excited to see how he's going to do. I'm very intrigued to see how the performance is going to be for him. And congrats to him on getting the chance and opportunity to drive for Young's Motorsports. I hope he does a really good job in that truck. I think he's going to probably finish in the back of the pack more than likely. Hope he can do a good job and run really, really well at North Wilkesboro next weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carlos Sainz Sr. As was reported by Motorsports.com, a couple other big F1 publications as well, that's reported that Carlos Sainz Sr. is considering running against Mohammed bin Sulayem to be the next FIA president, with the election coming up for 2025. Now, currently at the moment, Mohammed bin Sulayem is currently the president of the FIA, and a lot of people, when it was announced he was going to be coming in to take over, I think there's a lot of excitement around it. However, since Mohammed has come into Formula One to be the new FIA president, I feel like Formula One has kind of taken a dip. There's also been some things that I don't really agree with Mohammed bin Sulayem on, and I think some of the things he stands for, I just don't really kind of agree with at this point. Carlos Sainz Sr. is, of course, the father, Carlos Sainz Jr., who currently competes in Formula One in Williams, and we know he's been really strong over there at times this year. I am very intrigued to see what Carlos Sainz Sr. is going to do. Maybe he gets the product over there at Formula One better, and maybe he helps the drivers out in a big way as well, because, of course, F1 and the FIA have two different governments. Of course, F1's part of the FOM with Liberty Media, so they kind of have their own thing going on at this particular moment right now. But I really hope that if Carlos Sainz Sr. is able to win, we can get some big changes in Formula One, right? Because I think F1 at this moment, there's some big changes that are going to be desperately needed to get F1 back to the top of the ranks that it is. I think it's growing in the U.S. right now, but I think that there's some things they can do better to keep people around long term. So I think that if he can come in and make some of those changes that I think he wants to make, I think it could lead to Formula One, and especially things in the FIA getting better down the road. So we'll see what happens down the road, but I think it's really intriguing to see that Carlos Sainz Sr. is looking to run for president of FIA. I really hope he can do a good job if he gets elected as a new FIA president, but I think there's a chance Mohammed could also still win the FIA president role after this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Franco Colapinto and Jack Doohan. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Jack Doohan is no longer driving for Alpine F1, and it was confirmed that Franco Colapinto will be driving for Alpine F1 for the next 5 Formula One races, including this upcoming weekend's event that will be happening right before the Monaco Grand Prix. There's been a lot of speculation that this was going to happen, and now it is officially confirmed that Franco is going to be taking over. Now, it's been expected this was going to happen eventually, right? We all kind of knew it was very likely that Franco was going to be coming in and taking over that seat on it for at least a little bit. But I thought he'd be taking over for the rest of the year. So this is interesting. Doesn't mean that Jack Doohan is out. We really don't know. But I feel for Jack Doohan because he's a rookie, and I think Jack Doohan is a talented driver. But I think this has been the long-term plan from the get-go. And I'm going to be honest here. I don't think Franco Colapinto is as good of a driver as people make him out to be. I think he's not as great as people make him out to be. He had a couple really good runs, but he crashed a lot too. And I just feel like that you're not upgrading Franco over Jack Doohan. I think Jack is a talented driver, and I feel like that they should have given him at least a little bit more time. But this is the problem with Formula One. We've seen this time and time again. We saw this with Liam Lawson, where they took him out of the Red Bull car, and Yuki's come in, and Yuki's looked okay, but he hasn't looked great so far, so he hasn't looked as much better than Liam Lawson at this point. So I personally think that this move, not shocking to see this. We've been kind of expecting it, but at the same token, same time, I do feel very, very bad for Jack Doohan in this situation. I hope he gets another chance and opportunity. So I think Jack is a talented driver, and it's a shame that all these politics and all this stuff has to kind of come into play, but stuff like this doesn't shock me or surprise me, considering that we see stuff like this happen all the time. But I don't agree with some decisions that do get made in Formula One sometimes. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pato O'Ward. As it was announced yesterday that Pato O'Ward will be driving the McLaren F1 during FP1 practice at Mexico City during the Mexico City Grand Prix event in October. Of course, Pato O'Ward is one of the reserve drivers currently for the McLaren F1 team, and he's one of the drivers that is linked to the Cadillac program at this moment for 2026. Now, Pato O'Ward has been able to do some FP1 stuff in the past, but he's never competed in Formula 1. He was, of course, I think in the Formula 1 Academy for Red Bull not too long ago, back in the day, back around 2019 and 2020. Then, of course, he came back to IndyCar around 2021. I would love to see Pato O'Ward down the road get the chance and opportunity to drive in Formula 1. And also, what's big about this, too, is the fact we know there's a lot of talk right now that maybe they could be racing in Mexico City in 2026 in IndyCar, which I think would be a pretty big win if it could definitely happen. But for Pato, this is a really great opportunity for him. I hope he can have a lot of success in this test, and I think he will be faster than other drivers in the field because I think he's more talented than other drivers in the field personally in Formula 1 like a Lance Stroll. I don't think he's going to be better than Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, who I think are both very talented, but I do think that Pato is going to do a solid and good job overall behind the wheel of that car. So I'm very excited to see what he can do, what he could definitely bring to the table, and I think it's going to be very intriguing to see how he can do in that FP1 test in Mexico. We know how fast those cars are. I think it's going to be an older McLaren, I'm pretty sure, but I think it's pretty exciting nonetheless. He'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for McLaren F1 in the FP1 session in Mexico City. I'm very intrigued to see how he's going to do in that test. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. As was reported by Breakart on his Twitter page yesterday, that Chase Elliott, according to him, is expected to run the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Pocono in about a month and a half from now. According to him, responding to somebody, it sounds like he'll be driving the number 17 car for Hendrick Motorsports during that event. Now, I believe Chase Elliott does have a race scheduled, or I don't remember if he's already run a race so far this year, but I do think Chase Elliott does have another race scheduled later this year with Hendrick Motorsports. Now, Chase Elliott obviously has kind of struggled a little bit in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. Despite the fact he's sitting in the top 4 points, it does have a really consistent number where he's finishing the top 20 every single week. You look at Chase Elliott so far this year, and he's not been as fast compared to his teammates. So I do think for Chase Elliott, I think the goal is to just get experience. He has won previously, Pocono back in 2022, even though it was a little bit considering the fact that Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch technically were the winners of that event, but they both got disqualified because of tape on the fascia, I'm pretty sure, that kind of cost them the win. But for Chase, we know that 17 car has been really, really fast. He didn't run that great at Pocono last year, but I do think Chase Elliott will be better. Of course, that 17 car has won with Kyle Larson this year, and it's been really competitive. Larson probably should have 2 wins with that car so far. But I think for Chase, the goal is to just get as much experience as possible, do a really good job, and try to use that experience from that event and go out there and try to win the NASCAR Cup Series event the day after. So I'm excited to see how Chase is going to do. Hope he can have a really strong performance, and I hope he can do very, very well in the 17 car at Pocono. Excited to see how he'll run. That car has been really strong this year. We'll see how he can do with Hendrick Motorsports at Pocono in a couple weeks from now in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, we got to talk about Trackhouse Racing and the speed they have currently at this particular moment because there's a lot of conversation around this in NASCAR right now, and it kind of got talked about by Ross Chastain very, very recently, and he kind of talked about this after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas where he crossed the line in second place. But he says currently at the moment that Trackhouse Racing is struggling a lot with their speed, and they don't have a lot of speed currently at the moment. And he said this during an event that I believe Steven Toronto got a quote from as well on Wednesday, where he says they are not happy with their Saturday speed currently at the moment. They don't like where they're at, and they're way behind even compared to other teams. You look at Trackhouse Racing on Saturdays. Most weekends, I am seeing those cars qualifying in the back of the field. Shane Van Gisbergen's average start on ovals is a 30.2. Dion Suarez's average start is like a 25.6, and Ross Chastain's average start is like a 19.1. Suarez and Ross have dropped down a few positions compared to last year with their speed, and Shane Van Gisbergen, we all knew, was going to struggle on the ovals this year. I think we all kind of expected that. But I think that Trackhouse is definitely behind the 8 ball. And you obviously hear a lot of rumblings and rumors about potentially Dodge coming into NASCAR. I do think that Trackhouse is a massively prime candidate to go over to Dodge when they do come into the sport. But I think they've got to find a way to get their speed quicker. Now, obviously, Ross will have a good qualifying draw. Suarez, I think, also is a pretty good qualifying draw for this week. They'll probably be in that second group. Shane is going to have a little bit of work to do, but he's qualifying a little bit more forward in this session because he did finish 22nd. But I think for Trackhouse, they just got to find the speed because they're not the same team they were a few years ago. They kind of regressed a bit. But you think about Chevrolet, the Trackhouse team runs ECR engines. When you compare that to like Hendrick Motorsports, Inspire Motorsports, they run Hendrick engines. It's not like Ford or Toyota where they run pretty much the same engines. You've got two different engine compounds with the Chevrolets at this moment. I do think that plays a major factor why Trackhouse Racing is probably struggling with the speed they have currently at this moment. So I think they've got to find a way to get that speed a little bit up right now. Otherwise, I think that there's going to be some questions about the long-term future of this program. I want to see them get it figured out because personally, I want to see Trackhouse be as competitive as they were 3 years ago, but it seems like right now they're not at that level at this point, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done for them to get back to that level. So we'll see what happens long-term. There's a lot of questions about Suarez, whether he's going to stay with the team after this year. I hope they can figure out the speed so they can bring people in. I don't think it's that they're focusing on worldwide stuff. I just think there's a lot of speed issues with that team currently at this particular moment that definitely do need to be worked on. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, Hailie Deegan, of course, currently competes full-time in Indy NXT. And apparently recently during a media availability for the Indy NXT event, which of course they're competing this weekend at the Indy Road Course, she was asked a question by Bob Pockers about what she's been doing to try to get a little better in IndyCar in Indy NXT. Well, she says that she went to ask Jamie Chadwick for advice in regards to getting around the corners and getting around the track and picking up a little more speed around there. She had asked Jamie Chadwick for this advice. Now, Hailie Deegan, we all kind of knew, was probably going to struggle in IndyCar this year, Indy NXT, I should say. But she has been very, very far off the pace. When you look at her speed from this past week, I think it was a bar, if I'm not mistaken, she was almost 5 seconds off the pace in practice compared to even her teammates who are way up front in front of her, and she just went a lap down by the end of the event. She just has not really gotten up to speed very quickly. Now, we all talked about her NASCAR career, right? And I know maybe down the road she could come back, but her IndyCar career is going way worse than her NASCAR career is. And that's saying a lot considering her time in NASCAR was not very good. I just think that she's out to lunch currently at this moment right now, and I hope she can get better. I would love to see her be very competitive and do really, really good. The problem is right now it just doesn't seem like they've got it over there in Indy NXT. And I just think it's not working for her at this moment. I know that the big reason she's over there is because her father is trying to help her career out. And I think she got rushed up way too quickly on the NASCAR side. And I'm very worried that they're going to try to rush her into IndyCar long term. And I don't want that for her. I want to see her have success and get better. The problem is I'm not seeing that improvement that I really think we need to see from her because it's just she hasn't even improved in the few races that she's run. She at least finished on a lead lap at St. Pete, hanging the banner. She had times where she's shown it, but I just feel like, and I know she's trying the best as she can, but at the same token, at the same time, it's just not really working out for her at this moment. It's not been a good run for in IndyCar right now, and I think there's a lot that needs to be done for her to definitely get better. The big thing is, can she get better? I think that she can. Will she improve? That's the big question, though. Will she be able to improve? I don't know at this point. That's the thing. I don't know if she is going to be able to improve enough to do a really good job at IndyCar long term and be in IndyCar long term as well. So we'll see what happens in the future for Hailie Deegan and whether she can get better. But right now, I'm definitely concerned about the performance. I'm not seeing any improvement. She's way behind her teammates. She's not doing a good job. Hopefully by the end of the year, she's way more up the pace and closer to the back of the field. But right now, it's not working. I think she may have a chance to do better because she did test and was a little bit closer to her teammates by the end of the sessions in the offseason. But right now, it's not working out for her, and she's not doing that good of a job in IndyCar currently at this moment. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the CW. Now, earlier this week, it was reported by Adam Stern, and we spoke a lot about remote broadcasts and what the future of the broadcast could look like for some of the events. And the head of the CW, can't remember the guy's name exactly, but he said that they're going to be making some executive decisions on when they're going to be at the racetrack and when they're going to be at the studio. According to the CEO of the CW, he says that they will basically have a lot of races in the studio in May, but they do plan to be on the road a lot more in June. Now, we did see them go on the road at Talladega a couple weeks ago, and I feel like the broadcast during that one was one of the better broadcasts we've seen. Now, obviously, we kind of knew remote broadcasts were going to be becoming a thing for the CW for this year and will be part of the NASCAR Productions facility. Now, I will say when you look at the remote broadcast for the CW compared to Fox, they are still way better. But I am not a big fan of remote broadcasts. And I think especially if they're doing it for Charlotte, which I would have to think they're going to be at the track for Charlotte. I know people said when they saw May, they said, oh, they're not going to be there for Charlotte. I would think they're going to probably show up at Charlotte, right? But I think that they should show up, should not be basically in a studio, especially when Charlotte is right outside. You don't need to be staying in a studio for race at Charlotte. That's unacceptable if that's the case. But I'm glad to see it sounds like they're going to be going on the road a little bit more going forward, because I think you should be on the road and you shouldn't be going to a studio and shouldn't be having races broadcasted from a studio, for example. I think that you need to be at the racetracks. I think that's where the people should be who are broadcasting these races. And the fact that there's conversation that they're going to be going back out in the booth again and not going to be out on the road, that's a little frustrating to me. So I think the CW, they started the year off on such a good note, and I think their broadcasts have still been very good. Shout out to NASCAR Productions, and if Fox had NASCAR production quality on their coverage, I think it'd be pretty good. But personally, I think for the CW, I really wish they would stop doing the remote broadcasts on a personal front, because I do think the remote broadcasts, they look a little sloppy, and they don't personally look very, very good. And I think that if they continue remote broadcasts long term, it won't look good. It's not just NASCAR doing this. By the way, this is an issue across the board when you look at all sports at the moment right now. So I do believe that they need to stop doing remote broadcasts in a pretty big way and be at the racetrack a lot more going forward. So we'll see what happens in regards to the future of this with remote broadcasts, but I personally do think that they don't need to be doing remote broadcasts, and I think they should be at the racetrack a little more than they are currently at the moment. But it sounds like they'll be on the road a little more, which I think that's good, but I think they should be at the track a lot more instead of being in remote booths, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Will Buxton was on the most recent Happy Harvick podcast that many of you probably saw on Thursday. And Will Buxton basically kind of criticized the super license system that Formula One has currently at the moment, and he went after that super license system, and he says that he would love to see Kyle Larson in a Formula One car. He says that a super license system, he understands why they implemented it to Formula One, but he feels like that it's a little bit ridiculous that people in Formula 3 get more super license points than a NASCAR champion or someone that wins IndyCar races for that matter. They get more super license points in Formula 3 than that. And he also says that Kyle Larson should have the opportunity, if you're a NASCAR champion, you should get the opportunity to race in Formula 1. I completely agree with Will Buxton on this. Look, Kyle Larson has been obviously a really good driver, and we've heard people in the Formula One world who are interested in working with Kyle Larson. Zach Brown, for example. There's been talks that he could be in the future doing a McLaren test in Formula One. I know Larson is definitely interested in doing some Formula One stuff right now. And I think that guys like Larson should get the chance and opportunity. It should not matter about the super license system. I think the super license system is so broken the way they've got it right now. The fact that a Formula 3 champion can get more points than almost like a guy who finishes in the top 2 or 3 in IndyCar is completely absurd to me. The fact that you have drivers that are as talented as they are, like a Colton Herta, who's been linked to the new program, Alex Palou, who's been also linked to the Cadillac program, those guys may not be fully eligible because they don't have a super license points. Yet you have drivers, of course, like people like Franco Colapinto, who didn't even graduate for enough super license points to get into Formula 1, by the way, and other drivers who didn't graduate enough to get those super license points. I think that's certainly really, really frustrating. I think for Formula 1, I think it's a bad look on their part. I get, again, why they brought the super license system in, but at the same time, I think the super license system has a lot of flaws, and I also do think it does have a lot of gimmicks. So if they could find a way to change up the super license system, maybe give out less points, for example, I think that would be the easiest way to do it, because you've got some drivers in there that should not be in Formula 1 right now. I just think that if you had more talented guys, I think the racing product would be a lot better. Now, having new teams coming in, I think that's going to help a lot with bringing more people in and more talent in, and discovering more talent down the road could help. I hope we get 24 during 26 teams, because I think then some of these guys in IndyCar, like a Plo, like a Larson, like a Herta, like an O'Ward, could down the road get a chance and opportunity to race in Formula One. But yes, the super license system needs to be changed, and I think there's a lot of issues with that super license system currently at this particular moment that I do think need to be changed for it to be a lot better going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about race lengths. Now, there has been a lot of talk and conversation on social media over the course of the last couple of days around the lengths of races and shortening them up because of the younger demographic being interested. I think it was a fan who kind of talked about this where they said that they think one of the reasons that a lot of people aren't tuning in that average 18 to 49 demographic is because of the lengths of the races. They think that if we shorten up the races, that it would make the racing a lot better and more younger fans would tune in, because he looks at Formula One where their races are a lot shorter and people are tuning in. While I do think there might be a little bit of truth to that, I don't think that is entirely accurate. I don't think it's all about the lengths of the races. Now, NASCAR in recent years has realigned some of the races. Now, I personally don't think we needed 500-mile Dover races back then. You don't need 500-mile Rockingham races that ever come back. You don't need 500-mile races at Pocono, for example. You don't need, especially with it being a super speedway now, I don't think you need a 500-mile race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But I don't think we need to shorten any more races. I think NASCAR's done a good job shortening up the races that did need to be shortened up. I don't think it's all about the length of the race, however. I think it's the pace of the race and the feel of the race. There are 2 planned cautions every single race. If I'm not mistaken, when you add up the time of the stage cautions, that's an average of almost 20 minutes every single race that we spend under yellow, because we spend 5 or 6 laps under caution, at least on the Cup side, and sometimes it even feels longer for the Craftsman Truck Series as well. If you got rid of stage cautions, that shortens up the race right there. If you stop basically having the longer yellows for cleaning up debris, that shortens up the race. The races haven't gotten shorter much, despite the fact that races have been shortened by 100 miles. I think Daniel Cespedes did a really good graph that you probably should go check out, and he did a really good graph explaining that we haven't even seen much of a drop-off when it comes to the length of the race, despite the fact that many races have been shortened. I don't think we need to shorten any more races. I think the number that we've got right now is fine. Honestly, it'd be fine if we had another 500-mile race if we wanted to. But I don't think we need to shorten races. I think the broadcast also is a big role of this and why people aren't tuning in as much. I think the broadcasts are dated, at least on Fox. Now, I know NASCAR, at least with some of the other broadcast partners, they're trying. I'm very intrigued to see the Amazon broadcast and the other broadcasts going forward as well. To me, though, I don't think we need to shorten races. I don't really think we need to in my opinion. I think there's a lot of other areas that NASCAR could really look at to kind of get the race in a much better position long term. But again, I don't think shortening the races is a thing they need to do. I think a lot of the race lengths are fine, and I don't think we need to shorten any more races going forward. I think the big thing is the pace of the race, the feel of the race. I think that's the most important thing we need to focus on. I don't think the pace and the length of the race is the most important thing that they probably should be focused on currently at this moment. I think there's a lot of other areas in NASCAR could focus on to try to get a better long term, like something that we're going to talk about here in just a short little minute. I think you're going to be very intrigued about that, but I think that the races shouldn't be shortened going forward, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about horsepower. Now, one of the biggest conversations been talked about in the industry over the course of the last couple months has been the horsepower, especially for the short tracks. NASCAR with the next-gen car, we know that they don't have as much horsepower as they did with the Gen 6 car. The Gen 6 car has 750 horsepower. When you look at the next-gen car, it has 670 horsepower across the board. And I think there's a lot more issues than just horsepower with the next-gen car. But one thing that NASCAR has not tried at this moment is horsepower. Well, recently there's been some talk and conversation in the industry that it sounds like NASCAR might be a little more open to adding more horsepower to the next-gen car. Mike Ford, who is a senior communication director for NASCAR, actually spoke on this on the most recent Holler Talk. And he says that they are open to increasing horsepower in NASCAR. Now, what was the number he exactly said? Well, he said that they are looking at probably going from 670 to 750 horsepower. Now, he does talk about some of the people saying that going to 900 to 1,000 horsepower. He says that that's probably off the top talk currently at the moment. He says the reason is right now is because of the cost in the sport. Now, I'll get to that here in just a second, but I think a 750 horsepower is at least a little bit of a start. Do I think 750 horsepower is enough, however? No, I don't think 750 horsepower is going to at least fix all the issues, but I do think it will help at least a little bit. We all know the short tracks, and especially the super speedways, for that matter, road course somewhat too, are becoming the bread and butter of the sport. But the short tracks, in my opinion, have completely suffered with the next-gen car. We've done all these short track changes. We've done all these aero changes, so I think horsepower has to be the next way we go to. Super speedways, I think they've got their own issues. I think maybe even decrease in horsepower for those races actually might make the racing a little bit better on the super speedways, because I think they're running like 510 horsepower on the super speedways. I think they probably should decrease horsepower and get rid of the fuel mileage saving, all that stuff would fix some of the issues there. And I think the road courses, while they're solid, they haven't been as good, because I think they haven't been great. I think they've gotten better, but they haven't been absolutely the most fantastic races overall. I think the short tracks having increase in horsepower somewhat will definitely help. Now, I personally think that if you want to see major changes and things be drastically improved, you got to get up to that 850 to 900 to 1,000 horsepower range. I think that will actually fix a lot more of your issues. You're going to have tires getting off the ground. You're going to have the cars going all over the place. And I think the most talented guys are going to be able to show. But with 750, I do think that you will get at least some better racing. Will it be perfect? No. I think there's still a long way to go. I think the car is going to have to be redesigned in order to do this, because currently they're running a 900 horsepower engine that's being choked down to 670. And I think that's a big issue, is this isn't going the full horsepower that it needs. Like back then, you had 750 horsepower, but they would run 750 horsepower engines. This is a 900 horsepower engine, by the way, that's been choked down to 670. So I think if we find a way to increase that horsepower, that'd be good. And again, it sounds like NASCAR is looking at doing that for next year, which I think is a good thing. At least they're having talks and conversations on that. But I think at this particular moment in point, there's a lot more that needs to be done instead, and I hope they can absolutely get the horsepower increase in this next-gen car, because I think that's going to be a big way the sport at least gets a little better down the road. But at least I'm glad to see they're open to adding more horsepower to the next-gen cars. I do think they need to add more HP. I think horsepower is an important thing. We haven't really tried that at this point, so I do think adding a little more horsepower should be the way to go if the sport is going to get better, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we have some pretty big updates in regards to the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit. So we obviously know that 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are suing NASCAR on antitrust claims, and NASCAR is also countersuing them on the same way as well. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Wednesday that 2311 and Front Row have dismissed court proceedings with Formula One Liberty Media in trying to compel compliance with the subpoena for F1 financial info. Now, Bob Pockrass does note that the other parts of the other people that are involved, the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, the other companies that they are going after to try to get a little bit of financial information, those people have not responded yet, but I would have to think down the road they are going to drop their litigation down the road. Now, they're asking for financial information from F1 and Liberty Media and other major sports companies as well to try to kind of figure out how they're doing the business and how the sport is being governed currently at this particular moment. And then some other information that actually came out yesterday as well. NASCAR has been allowed to amend their counterclaims against 2311 in Front Row Motorsports. The most intriguing thing that I find from this is the fact that the other teams could, in fact, end up getting involved with this lawsuit long term. NASCAR has threatened teams that they would get rid of the charter system altogether if other teams would get involved. I think there was a little bit of a bluff and a threat. They're trying to basically tell teams, hey, if you get involved with this lawsuit, we might just get rid of the charter system altogether if we end up losing. Because I know there's some teams that are interested in getting involved. I think about the fact of teams like RCR, where I believe Richard has said it's like a communist regime. Rick Hendrick, I think about Hendrick Motorsports. I don't think other teams like a RFK, for example, or Trackhouse, for example, are probably going to get involved in this, but I think there's some other teams that are really looking at it. I wouldn't be surprised if Team Penske and even Joe Gibbs Racing as well would be interested in getting involved. But there's also one other very important thing we need to talk about, is by the time many of you are watching this video, there is a hearing going on currently at this moment between 2311 Racing Front Row and NASCAR in regards to the charters. Today is the big day on that front to talk about the appeal on that injunction hearing. The injunction, of course, was granted last year for the Trackhouse Racing charters to go to 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. NASCAR, of course, filed an appeal, and that's going to be very important. Now, a decision on that is not going to be heard, will not be made today. A decision will probably come sometime around the Coke 600. I would think it might come within the next week or so, and once that does get announced, we'll talk about it here, but that could be really important because it could affect the drivers over at 2311 Racing, right? Because I think that it could affect everybody over there because if they end up losing their charters, this could put drivers like Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick and Riley Herbst and all those guys, and same with Noah Gragson, Zane Smith, and Todd Gillen in jeopardy. Now, obviously, I think they would be set for the remainder of the year if they do lose their charters. Now, I personally think that I don't see any major changes coming. I think they'll be fine, but you never know. They could be affected by the lawsuit, and I think that all the drivers are a little bit concerned about that, but a decision will be coming in a couple weeks on that front because the judge had granted them that preliminary injunction so they could compete for the 2025 season without having issues there. I think there's a lot of information coming out soon. We all remember, of course, the trial is happening, I believe, December 2nd of this year. So we're trying to get the trials done within the next 6 or 7 months. Hopefully everything will be done by the end of this year. And I think the sport is going to change in a big way. I mean, NASCAR's already been making some pretty big changes to how they're running things currently at this particular moment right now. So I am very intrigued to see how things are going to go long-term with this lawsuit. I think a lot of information is going to come out soon. I mean, NASCAR is going after Curtis Polk heavily. I know that Michael Jordan is not happy with NASCAR that much at this particular moment right now. So I do think when you look at this lawsuit, I think there's so much stuff that is going to be coming out very, very soon that could have a major effect long-term in the sport, and I think some new information should be coming soon that we'll probably discuss on the channel once we do get the official decision on the Stewart-Haas Racing decision on those charters from Stewart-Haas Racing and them getting those charters. We'll talk about it here live on the channel, but as of right now, I think there's some big stuff coming very soon on that, and we'll be keeping an update on that very, very soon on this channel. And now we're going to head jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. Now, there has been a lot of talk and conversation throughout the year so far about the uncertainty of future of the Chicago Street Course. And there was an article that came out very recently that was reported by Adam Stern as well about the future of that event. Now, Julia Geis who of course is the president of the Chicago area and the president of the Chicago Street Course and also Chicagoland as well. She's been asked a lot of questions about what the future of that event is going to look like, and she kind of spoke a little about the future as well in this article. She says, right now, our focus is on this year of 2025, but we will in the future start discussing option years for 2026 and beyond as well. This is, of course, the final year of a 3-year contract that they do have with the Chicago Street Course currently at the moment, and NASCAR as well. Now, I think the first 2 years have had, unfortunately, a little bit of bad luck. I think the first year had a ton of bad luck with the concerts not happening, and the Xfinity Series race not even making it to halfway, but they had to cancel the event so they can get the Cup Series event in, which they were able to get majority of that race in. It was a very intriguing race because Shane Van Gisbergen was able to pick up his first career win in his first start in the Cup Series, the first time we've seen that since Johnny Rutherford in 1963, almost 60 years since that event. And then 2024, we're able to get the concerts in. We had a badass NASCAR Xfinity Series event. But then, of course, the rain came in, affected the event, and we saw Alex Bowman pick up the win. A lot of people were not very happy with the procedures of that event and continued to bring out the stage caution, despite the fact they were taking so long to get them in. I think they had like a 30 to 40-minute stage yellow, which I think was absolutely ridiculous and shouldn't have been as long of a caution that they were doing. Now, looking at the future of this event for 2025, I would not be surprised or shocked if this is the final year of that event, and I do think it is very likely going to be the last year of the Chicago Street Course, and here is why. There's been a couple reasons. Number one, there is a lot of talk of San Diego. NASCAR wants to be in the Southern California market. They really want to be out there because they're not in the Los Angeles market. We know they're not going to Auto Club right now. The track is not going to be ready for 2026 for sure. I don't think they'll be ready for 2027, and I certainly don't think they're going to be ready for 2028. But NASCAR wants to be in that Southern California market, and San Diego is a favorite to land that spot. They are talking to other cities like Cincinnati perhaps about doing this. I think Baltimore has been mentioned, and Portland's also mentioned as well as potential landing spots, same as with Pittsburgh as well, being a landing spot for the Street Course event. But a lot of people in the industry are expecting a race in that Southern California market in the San Diego area. Now, the other big thing I want to talk about is there's also a chance we may not have a Street Course race in 2026 because it's unknown if San Diego is going to happen next year. But a lot of talk right now is that NASCAR does want to stay in the Chicago area for 2026, but I don't think it's going to be there. there is a track that right now I think is actually almost ready to go, and that is the Chicagoland Speedway. Chicagoland is a fantastic racetrack. And what's the type of racing right now that is the best when it comes to the next-gen car? The intermediate tracks. Chicagoland always put on great racing, especially in the late Gen 6 era, even with the 550 package, which in my opinion had very bad racing. I think that the 550 package put on a really good race there in 2019. And the next-gen car races exceptional at the intermediate tracks for the most part. So I think if you brought the next-gen car there and put on a good racing product, I think a lot of people would definitely be really excited about that. So I think it's very likely that Chicagoland is going to be back. I think Chicago Street Course is a really good event. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of things that I really love about the Chicago Street Course. But the problem is, once again, is the fact that they're not... The problem is that I know they're looking at option years, right? But NASCAR wants to move the event around, it sounds like. And I think that the event is going to get moved around. I think there's a lot of excitement around the streets racing. And I was against it for a while, but honestly, having a street course event, I think it's huge. The ratings have generally been really positive for them. I think the first year had almost 5 million people tune in, which was the second most watched race and the most watched event since like the 2017 Brickyard 400. That was not the Daytona 500, and you think about the last year, while it was still down, it had like over 4 million viewers, and I think a lot of people still love the Chicago Street Course event. I know many people would love to keep this event around. I know some people are very intrigued about it and would love to see this event stay, but you have a lot of people in the city. There, of course, you have the current mayor of this city who... It's unknown how long he's going to be the mayor of Chicago. I think it's only for like 2 years, I'm pretty sure, that they are mayor of the city. Then they go through elections and election cycles, I'm pretty sure. So I do think for Chicago, I just don't see this event lasting after this year. And I love the event, don't get me wrong. I was against it originally, but I honestly think the event has brought a lot to the city and has brought a lot to the table. The problem, again, is the fact that there's a lot of people that are in there that do not like the event. It was brought in because of election from Lori Lightfoot, a.k.a. Beetlejuice. It was brought in from that. And I think a lot of people don't really like the event because of her bringing it in for political reasons. I think, and you look at politics and all that stuff, political side of things really plays a role in these events as well. So I think, again, this is very likely going to be the final year of the Chicago Street Course. And while it is a shame to see that this event more likely is going away after this year and probably going somewhere else, maybe for 27, because again, the conversation for Jordan Bianchi reported recently in the most recent event is that San Diego, while it's talk it could happen next year, many think it's going to be 27, and with there likely going to be a second off day for next year, I just don't see them running the race next year at this moment. So we'll see what happens long term for the Chicago Street Course, but I think at this particular moment and point that this is going to be the last year of the event. I would love to see the event continue, but at same time, I think they want to go to different parts of the country and do different things with the Street Course event, and I hope it kind of happens. We'll just have to wait and see what happens in regards to the future of the event, but as of right now, in my opinion, I think this is going to be the last year of the Chicago Street Course going around. Very intrigued to see what the future and the long-term future could be, though, of the event in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, many of you probably saw this post on Junior Motorsports page yesterday, but according to them, it sounds like there might be a major announcement that could be coming on May 22nd. And you look under that car and you look under the post as well, many people like myself have kind of begun to speculate, but it looks to me under that car, it looks actually like maybe it could be an Xfinity car. It certainly could definitely be, but it actually looks like a next-gen car. And we know that Junior Motorsports has been a little bit open and interested in maybe going back and doing some Cup Series races. And we know that Travis Whiskey recently had about a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, I should say, we talked about this on the channel. Travis Whiskey wants to do more partnerships with Junior Motorsports and Dale Jr. as well. We saw success of their NASCAR Cup Series debut. They ran the Daytona 500. They brought a lot of eyes into the sport. We saw ratings, I think, go up compared to last year, I'm pretty sure. And I think a big reason for that was the Dale Jr. effect. And of course, Junior Motorsports finished inside the top 10. And Dale Jr. said after that event, he said that they would be open, and they're more open to getting a charter, which could lead to an announcement for 2026. Now, I don't entirely expect Junior Motorsports to have a full-time program for 2026, but I think there's definitely a chance. The big reason why I'm not entirely sure if they're going to have a full-time program, though, is because they would need a charter to run a full-time program. And we're still unsure right now where the charter system is going to be for 2026. There's even a little bit unknown about that at this particular moment in point. So many people are not entirely sure if that is going to be existing after this year. But let's say if Junior Motorsports is able to get a charter, they would cost almost $40 million, and I think that investor would have to come away. Now, Junior has had some interest from people and investors. I know the Steinbrenners have been talking to Dale Jr. about this, so that is certainly something interesting to look at. But one of my theories is there could be a way that Junior Motorsports finds a way into the sport without having to secure a charter. I think there's some teams you could look at, one of them being Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports has very close ties with Hendrick Motorsports, and Junior Motorsports also has close ties with the Hendrick Motorsports team as well. And I think Spire will be the most interesting one, right? You think about this. There are drivers who have driven for Junior Motorsports who also drive for Spire. Sammy Smith has driven for their Truck Series program recently, and you've got other drivers like Connor Zilisch, who's also driven for Spire Motorsports as well. Now, obviously, at this particular moment, all three drivers are currently under contract through next year. Justin Hilly has a contract through 2026, and Hendrick is really high on him. They're also really high on Carson Osevar as well, and Carson Osevar has been doing an exceptional job, 17th in the points by the fact he was 32nd in points like 5 races ago. He's up to 17th, which is extremely impressive, by the way. And Michael McDowell's been doing a solid job in that car and almost won most recently at Texas Motor Speedway and would be in the playoffs or close to the playoffs had he not crashed at the end of the event. But I think there's actually another team that could come into play. That team is Trackhouse Racing. And I think there's a couple drivers that come into play, and that involves Connor Zilisch and Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez, from what we understand, is in a contract year with Trackhouse Racing. And there's a lot of talk and speculation right now that this is going to be the final year for Daniel Suarez in the group over there at Trackhouse Racing. I think Daniel Suarez is a talented driver, and I do think he deserves to be in the NASCAR Cup Series. The problem is Daniel Suarez has generally underperformed compared to his teammate Ross Chastain. Now, many people are going to say, what about Shane Van Gisbergen? Well, the reason I don't think it's going to be Shane Van Gisbergen is because Shane Van Gisbergen has driven for Junior Motorsports and will drive for Junior Motorsports in a couple races this year. And also Ross Chastain has driven for Junior Motorsports. Daniel Suarez has not announced a ride for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series as of yet. If he driven for Junior Motorsports in Xfinity, I would say maybe he stays. But I think this is the team that likely goes with it. Now, who would drive the number 99 car or 87 car for that matter? Well, I think it'd be Connor Zilisch. There's a lot of talk that Connor Zilisch is going to be a NASCAR Cup Series driver in 2026. Yes, we know he did suffer a back injury recently, unfortunately, which we do think he'll be back in a couple weeks from now in both the Xfinity Series and Cup Series event because he's supposed to do the double in the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series events as well. I think this would be the most likely option way to get the Junior Motorsports team in there. They wouldn't have to spend as much money. And Justin Marks is very closely tied with Dale Jr. They work very closely in the Cars Tour. They both have ownership stake in the Cars Tour currently at this moment. And I think that you're seeing that team be tightly close with Junior Motorsports. Dale Jr. wants it, in my opinion, I think he does want to get involved in the Cup Series. But the problem is that it's the charters. The charter costs are very high currently at the moment right now. From what we understand with the Legacy charter, they pay $45 million for the charter for Rick Ware. Now, obviously, there's unknown if they're even going to get that charter in the first place, which could have a big effect on Rick Ware Racing's future and whether they're going to be around after this year or not, because they would have to sell their charter probably to RFK and be out of the sport probably long term. But I think when you look at this for Junior Motorsports, I think many people want to see them in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. Now, I personally think that this could just be announced for another one-off, and I think that'd be interesting. I think if they do another event, it would be with Justin Allgaier, but it'd be cool. I'm just saying, if they want to put Connor Zilisch in a Junior Motorsports car for a race or so, that'd be really cool too, because I think that they need to give him some experience or maybe give an opportunity like a Carson Quaffle. Carson Quaffle, in my opinion, is very, very good, and I think he's really been good this year with Junior Motorsports, so I'd be very intrigued to see if he got the chance and opportunity to drive for that program. But Sammy Smith's also been solid this year. I know Sammy would be interested in making his Cup Series debut, or if they wanted to go bold, go give like Mark Truex Jr. Mark Truex Jr. hasn't driven at all this year outside of the Daytona 500, Or, I don't know, go get Daniel Ricciardo for, like, Mexico at this point. That'd be kind of fun. I know there was a rumor going around that he was going to drive for Junior Motorsports in that event. So I think that that is something that could be very interesting. When I look at this situation for Junior Motorsports, again, I know they're interested in having some interest in the Cup Series next year. But again, I talk about it. It all comes down to getting that charter, and the charters are so expensive right now. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty on whether charters are even going to be around after this year currently at the moment. So I am very intrigued to see what happens with those charters going forward. But I know Junior Motorsports is interested. Hey, if Kyle Busch ever becomes available, maybe they get him. I don't know at this point. But we'll keep an eye on the story as time progresses and goes on. And we'll see if Junior Motorsports does have a Cup program next year. So that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, and if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get some more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Junior Motorsports will have a Cup program next year in some way, shape, or form? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and what are your thoughts about other stories talked about today on the channel, including the future of Chicago. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We probably won't have another video dropping until tonight with the ARCA race coming up. Then tomorrow we are going to have a little bit of a silly season update, talking about some of the stuff we talked about today. And we're also going to probably have the review for the truck race and also Cup qualifying as well, reactions. And then, of course, on Sunday, we're going to have the starting lineup video for the Avon Health 400, and we'll have the race view for the Avon Health 400. And then if Shane Van Gisbergen does well, we'll do a video on that. And then Monday, we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. Got content coming up. People like Haley Degan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carlos Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Clay Safari, Matt Benedetto, Frankie Muniz, Connor Zillis, Junior Motorsports, Eric Almirold, Chandler Smith, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, other people like other industry like Tony Breidinger, and all that stuff as well. In the future of Dodge and Honda too, coming soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.